Hey, my name is Garv, and the topic for today is you're being mind controlled right now. How brainwashing actually works. So, before we begin, let me be clear about something. This is not a conspiracy theory, this is psychology. This is how the human mind actually works. And once you understand the mechanisms, you'll start seeing them everywhere. And I do mean everywhere. Most people think brainwashing looks like something out of a dystopian novel or dystopian movies. Prisoners of war being tortured in dark rooms, or maybe cult members sitting and chanting together. But that's all Hollywood nonsense. Real brainwashing is far more sneaky, far more common, and far more effective than anything you've seen in the movies. In fact, the most successful brainwashing is so seamless that the victim never realizes it's happening. They believe every thought in their head is their own original idea. But here's the thing, if you live in any modern society, you're being brainwashed right now. Your thoughts, your preferences, your values, your desires, a significant portion of what you consider to be you was carefully installed in your mind by people you have never met, for purposes you have never considered. Let me explain how this brainwashing works. The foundation of all effective brainwashing is information saturation. This means controlling the information environment so completely that alternative perspectives become literally unthinkable. It's not about forcing people to believe something, it's about making that something the only thing available to believe. Think about this. How many hours per day does the average person spend consuming media? Between television, social media, news, podcast, streaming services, and ads, we're talking about 8 to 12 hours of daily information consumption, right? That's more time than most people spend sleeping. Now, who controls that information flow? A very small number of corporations and institutions. They don't need to lie to you, though they sometimes do. They just need to decide what you're allowed to think about. Here's a simple example that sounds like science fiction, but is documented fact. Edward Bernays literally invented modern propaganda. In the 1920s, he was hired by tobacco companies to get women to smoke cigarettes. The problem was that smoking was considered masculine and inappropriate for women. So Bernays staged a publicity stunt and hired women to march while smoking cigarettes and called them torches of freedom. He linked smoking to women's liberation and independence. So within a decade, millions of women were smoking, believing they were making a feminist statement. They had no idea they were following a script written by a tobacco company. That's not just manipulation, that's brainwashing. And it worked because it used the fundamental mechanics of how beliefs are formed. The first mechanism is repetition. Simply put, the more often you hear something, the more true it seems. This happens automatically, below our conscious awareness. So you don't get to choose to believe something because you've heard it repeatedly. You simply just believe it. This is why successful brainwashing always involves repetition. The same messages from multiple sources, repeated endlessly until they become background noise in your consciousness. The second mechanism is social proof. Humans are tribal animals. We determine what's true not by independent analysis, but by observing what other people believe. If everyone around you accepts certain assumptions, questioning those assumptions feels not just wrong, but impossible. This is why effective brainwashing always creates the illusion of agreement and consensus. It doesn't matter what people actually think. It matters what they believe other people think. This is how it works. The most effective brainwashing doesn't tell you what to think. It tells you what to think about. It sets the focus and agenda of your awareness. Let me give you an example that will make this crystal clear. Every few years, there's a new crisis that dominates all media coverage. Everyone is talking about it, debating it, having strong opinions about it. People choose sides and argue passionately with friends and family. They feel deeply invested in their position. But the problem is, they don't choose to care about this issue. The issue was chosen for them. Someone somewhere decided this would be the thing everyone thinks about for the next 6 months. And it works because people believe their passionate engagement with the issue proves that they're thinking independently, when actually their attention has been completely hijacked. Meanwhile, issues that might be far more important to their actual lives receives no attention at all. This is agenda setting, and it's arguably the most powerful form of mind control ever developed. So you can have any opinion you want as long as you're having opinions about what they want you to think about. The third mechanism is emotional conditioning. Raw information doesn't change minds, but emotions do. Effective brainwashing always attaches powerful emotions to ideas. Fear is the most common, but pride, disgust, and righteous anger work just as well. And once an idea becomes emotionally charged, rational analysis becomes nearly impossible. People defend their emotionally based beliefs even when presented with contradictory evidence because questioning their emotional beliefs feels like a personal attack. This is why effective propaganda always includes an enemy, not just someone who disagrees with you, but someone who threatens everything you care about. Someone so dangerous that questioning your own side becomes literally unthinkable because it means helping the enemy. And once this dynamic is established, people will accept almost anything from their own side and reject almost everything from the other side, regardless of how good or bad it is. Now, let's talk about how this applies to entire populations. Countries don't need torture chambers to control their citizens' minds. They just need to control the information environment and social incentives. This is how they do it. First, you create a national mythology, a collection of myths or stories. Every country has one, a story about what makes this place special, what values it represents, why its system is superior. This mythology gets reinforced through education, media, ceremonies, and symbols. Children learn it before they can think critically about it. Adults rarely question it because doing so feels unpatriotic or antisocial. Second, you create in groups and out groups, us versus them, our way of life versus their way of life, our values versus their values. This creates loyalty and makes people defensive about their national identity. Criticism of the system becomes criticism of the whole group, which feels like a personal attack. Third, you control the flow of information about alternatives. People can't want what they can't imagine. If your only exposure to other system comes through your own system's lens, then alternatives will always look inferior or dangerous. This is not censorship. This is selective exposure and framing. Fourth, you make it so that people feel rewarded for being like everyone else and punished for being different. People who go along get along. They get better jobs, more social acceptance, fewer problems. But people who ask uncomfortable questions get labeled as troublemakers, conspiracy theorists, or unpatriotic. Social pressure does the rest. Let me give you a perfect example. In the early 20th century, a psychologist named John Watson conducted an experiment on a baby called Little Albert. He conditioned the child to fear white rats by making loud, frightening noises whenever the child saw a rat. Eventually, the child became afraid not just of rats, but of anything white and fuzzy. Rabbits, cotton, even Santa Claus. The fear spread beyond the original cause. And this is exactly how mass psychological conditioning works. You condition people to have emotional reactions to certain symbols, words, or ideas. Then those reactions generalize to related concepts. And eventually, people have strong emotional responses to things they've never actually experienced or analyzed. They just know they're supposed to feel a certain way. But what's really disturbing is that this conditioning is so effective that people will defend it even after you explain how it works. They'll say that their beliefs are based on logic and evidence, not conditioning. They will insist they came to their conclusions independently. They'll get angry at the suggestion that their thoughts are not entirely their own. This reaction is itself part of the conditioning. The belief that you're immune to influence is what makes you most vulnerable to it. So, how do you know if you've been brainwashed? Let me give you the warning signs. First, you have strong emotional reactions to certain topics that you can't fully explain rationally. Second, you find certain ideas literally unthinkable. Not wrong, but unthinkable. Third, you assume people who disagree with you on important topics are either stupid or evil. And fourth, you've never seriously considered that your assumptions about reality might be incorrect. If any of those apply to you, congratulations, you're human and you've been successfully programmed like every other human who's ever lived in a society. Now, I'm not saying all social conditioning is bad. Some of it is necessary for civilization to function. The problem is when the conditioning serves interests that are not your own. So, what's the solution? The solution is to become conscious of how these influences works so you can evaluate whether the influences in your life are serving you or using you. Ask yourself, who benefits when I believe this? Who benefits when I feel this way? Who benefits when I spend my attention on this topic instead of something else? Most importantly, seek out information sources that you disagree with. It's not about agreeing with them, but rather about understanding how different information environments produce different realities in people's minds. We all have our own versions of the truth, and it's fascinating to see how they are shaped. Remember, the mind that can be hijacked can also be liberated. But first, you have to acknowledge that it was hijacked in the first place. And that recognition, uncomfortable as it may be, is the first step toward genuine intellectual freedom. Brainwashing only works as long as you don't know it's happening to you. But once you recognize it, you can start to resist it. So what do you think about this topic? Let me know in the comments below, and please like this video and share it with someone who you think might benefit from its message. Thank you for listening. See you in the next one.